The emergency HOA meeting room felt like a courtroom designed by someone who'd only heard courtrooms described by a drunk person. Folding chairs arranged in crooked rows, a card table masquerading at a judge's bench, and fluorescent lights that flickered like dying fireflies. But the real spectacle was standing at the front of the room. Beverly called me the HOA Queen. Hutchinson clutched a stack of papers like they were the crown jewels, her face the color of a ripe tomato about to explode. Her perfectly coiffed silver hair was starting to escape its chemical prison, and her hands shook just enough to make the documents rustle like autumn leaves in a hurricane. "This is preposterous," she shrieked, her voice reaching frequencies that probably violated noise ordinances in 3 counties. "You can't just waltz back here and expect us to overturn a legitimate sale." I sat in the back row, jet-lagged, but grinning like the cat who'd not only gotten the cream but had also inherited the dairy farm. My tan from 2 months in Thailand was still fresh, and my phone was still buzzing with messages from my lawyer, my real estate agent, and the FBI fraud division. Oh yes, you read that right, the FBI, because Beverly Hutchinson, self-appointed Empress of Willowbrook Estates, had made one tiny miscalculation when she decided to sell my house while I was sipping coconut water on a beach in Phuket. She'd forgotten to actually own it first. 2.5 months ago, I'd been standing in my driveway, loading my suitcases into an Uber, when Beverly had materialized from her house like a polyester-clad genie from a very annoying lamp. "Going somewhere, Daniel?" she'd asked, her voice dripping with the kind of fake sweetness that usually preceded a knife in the back. "Thailand," I'd replied, double-checking my passport. 2 months of beaches, temples, and absolutely no HOA meetings? Beverly's smile had tightened like a noose. 2 months is quite a long time to leave a house unattended. "My security system and house sitter would disagree," I'd said, giving her my most diplomatic smile. "But thanks for the concern." That's when I'd seen it, that flash of something dark and calculating in her beady little eyes. Beverly Hutchinson was planning something, and whatever it wasn't going to be pleasant. I should have trusted my instincts. Beverly had been the HOA president for 7 years, not because anyone particularly liked her, but because she was the only person willing to turn suburban neighborhood management into a full-time career. She treated our quiet street like her personal kingdom, complete with subjects to terrorize and rules to enforce with the enthusiasm of a medieval inquisitor. Our feud had started 6 months earlier when I'd painted my front door navy blue instead of the approved colonial cream or heritage beige. Apparently, this was tantamount to declaring war on property values and the American way of life. The covenants clearly state that all exterior paint must be approved by the Architectural Committee, Beverly had announced during a board meeting, waving the HOA handbook like it was the Constitution. "It's a door, Beverly," I'd replied, "not a neon sign advertising a strip club. Rules are rules, Daniel. Either repaint it or face the consequences." I'd chosen option 3, hiring a lawyer to review the covenants and discovering that the Architectural Committee hadn't been properly constituted in over 3 years, making their rules about as legally binding as a fortune cookie. Beverly had not taken this well. What followed was 6 months of petty warfare disguised as community standards enforcement. First came the lawn infractions. Apparently, my grass was simultaneously too long and too short, depending on which day Beverly decided to measure it. She'd installed what I can only describe as a grass surveillance system. Daily photos of my lawn taken from various angles, complete with rulers for scale. Then came the mailbox violations. My mailbox was too far from the curb, then it was too close, then it was the wrong shade of black. Beverly had apparently appointed herself the unofficial mailbox inspector general. But her masterpiece was the excessive vehicle complaints. I owned 2 cars, a perfectly reasonable number for a single person. But according to Beverly, my weekend motorcycle constituted a commercial vehicle storage violation. Each complaint was meticulously documented, stamped with official HOA letterhead. and sent to every resident in the neighborhood. Beverly was building a case for something. I just couldn't figure out what. I should have seen it coming. The morning I left for Thailand, Beverly had been unusually friendly. She'd waved from her porch, wished me a safe trip, and even offered to keep an eye on my house while I was gone. "Don't worry about a thing, Daniel," she'd said with a smile that should have come with a warning label. "I'll make sure everything stays exactly as it should." Famous last words. 3 weeks into my vacation, I'd received a concerned email from my neighbor, Mrs. Kim. They were contractors at my house. Multiple contractors, working on what looked like major renovations. I'd called Beverly immediately. "Oh, that," she'd said, her voice casual as discussing the weather. "Just some emergency repairs. Water damage from a burst pipe. Don't worry, the HOA emergency fund is covering it." Something had felt wrong, but I was 12 time zones away and Beverly had provided photos of water damage that looked legitimate. I'd reluctantly agreed to let the emergency repairs continue. Big mistake. Week 6 of my vacation, Mrs. Kim had sent me a photo that made my blood run cold, a for sale sign in my front yard. I'd called Beverly again, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Beverly, why is there a for sale sign in my yard?" "Oh, Daniel," she'd sighed dramatically. "I'm so sorry you have to find out this way, but the water damage was extensive. Structural damage, mold, the whole 9 yards. The house was condemned as uninhabitable." Condemned? By who? The city inspector. Very sad. Really? But the HOA board voted to exercise our emergency powers under Section 12.4 of the covenants. We're selling the property to cover the assessment costs. I'd gone silent, my mind racing. Section 12.4 was about sidewalk maintenance. I'd read the covenants thoroughly during our door painting dispute. "Beverly," I'd said slowly, "Section 12.4 has nothing to do with property sales." "Well, I'm not a lawyer, Daniel. I'm just trying to protect the community's interests." That's when I'd hung up and called my attorney. The next 48 hours had been a whirlwind of international phone calls, emergency legal filings, and the kind of panic that comes from discovering someone is trying to steal your house while you're on vacation. My lawyer had immediately filed an injunction to stop the sale, but we were too late. Beverly had already accepted an offer from a cash buyer who'd agreed to purchase the property sight unseen for well below market value. The buyer, Beverly's nephew, Marcus Hutchinson, a wannabe real estate developer with a history of shady deals, and a bank account mysteriously flush with cash. But here's where Beverly had made her fatal mistake. She'd forged my signature on the deed transfer. Not just any signature, she'd apparently traced it from HOA documents I'd signed months earlier. The forgery was so obvious that even a first-year law student could have spotted it. Different pen, different pressure, different handwriting characteristics. My lawyer had immediately contacted the FBI Fraud Division, and within hours, federal agents were crawling all over my property like ants on a dropped ice cream cone. I'd cut my vacation short, booking the first flight back to the States. 24 hours of airports and airplane food had given me plenty of time to review the evidence my lawyer had gathered. The water damage photos Beverly had sent me. Stock photos from a restoration company's website. The city inspector who'd condemned my house didn't exist. The emergency board meeting where they'd voted to sell my property never happened. Beverly had essentially tried to steal my house using fake documents, forged signatures, and a scheme so transparent it was like trying to hide an elephant behind a telephone pole. The best part, she documented everything herself. Every fake invoice, every forged document, every fraudulent claim, all carefully filed in her personal HOA records as evidence of her authority. Beverly Hutchinson had created a paper trail that led directly to federal prison, which brought us to tonight's emergency meeting, called by Beverly herself to address the malicious allegations against her. The room was packed with neighbors who'd been watching the FBI investigation unfold over the past week. Beverly stood at the front, still clutching her stack of fake documents, still convinced she could talk her way out of federal fraud charges. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice quavering like a leaf in a tornado, "I've called this meeting to address the vicious lies being spread about my conduct as HOA president." I stood up slowly, my phone already recording. "Beverly," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, "before you continue, I should mention that there are two FBI agents waiting outside. They have a warrant for your arrest." The color drained from her face like water from a broken dam. That's impossible," she stammered. "I have documentation. I have authority." "You have forgeries," I replied calmly. "You have fraud. You have a federal indictment for mail fraud, wire fraud, and attempted grand larceny." I held up my phone, showing her the recording I'd made of our conversation 6 weeks ago. "You confessed to selling my house without my knowledge or consent. You admitted to forging documents. You implicated your nephew in a conspiracy to commit real estate fraud." Beverly's legs seemed to give out. She sank into the nearest chair, her fake documents scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. "I was protecting the community," she whispered. "You were committing federal crimes," I replied. "Multiple felonies. Actually, the FBI is very interested in your creative interpretation of HOA authority." That's when the door opened and two very official-looking people in dark suits entered the room. Beverly Hutchinson. The taller agent asked, "That's her," I said helpfully. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny." As they read Beverly her rights, she looked around the room with the expression of someone who just realized they'd been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. "This isn't over," she called out as they led her toward the door. "The HOA board will hear about this." "Beverly," I called after her, "you are the HOA board. Or were. Anyway, I'm pretty sure fraud conviction disqualifies you from community leadership." The last thing I saw was Beverly's shocked face as she disappeared through the doorway, flanked by federal agents. I turned to address the room full of stunned neighbors. "For anyone wondering, the house is fine. No water damage. No structural problems. Just a fresh coat of paint and some new security cameras. Oh, and the front door is staying navy blue." The applause was tentative at first, then enthusiastic as I walked out into the cool evening air. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Beverly's nephew just confessed to everything. Apparently, Andy Beverly promised him a $50,000 profit on the house flip. He's cooperating fully in exchange for reduced charges. I smiled, breathing in the sweet scent of justice and jasmine from Mrs. Kim's garden. Sometimes the best vacation souvenir, watching your enemy get arrested by the FBI.